I view myself more as a franchise owner of my ideas. A lot of it we monetize internally, but where we can do it externally through partnerships, that allows me to get closer to my dream. And when they're all productive, then there's days where I can go on vacation for 2 weeks and I know that, hey, the European partners are making me money today.
Welcome to Straight Talk for Business, where we dive deep into the ever-evolving world of strategy, managing changes and risks, learn how to stay ahead of the curve and navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. From enhancing your leadership style to executing strategies, this is your go-to source for making it happen. No matter your industry or business size, whether you're a seasoned executive, an entrepreneur, or a business professional, we've got you covered. Let's break barriers, challenge conventions, and unlock the secrets together. Tune in and put yourself on the path to success.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Dragasa again with my special guest today, Jeff Leitman. And we are here to have some straight talk about business. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeff Leitman. I had an opportunity to meet him some time ago. Jeff is a Montreal native, a Canadian who has ultimately moved to Irvine, California, and where he's been for about the last 15 years or so. And Jeff has, to his credit as an entrepreneur, some pretty unique products that he has evolved over time. He initially started out with some audio equipment, a little company called Rocksteady. And then he had a brilliant idea to come up with something called the Piggy stand, which was really a suction cup Piggy type of stand for a cell phone. And that little product sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Of course, that was able to fund him on growing the Rocksteady business with wireless speakers and other equipment. And finally, during the pandemic, Jeff was inspired to look at cookware. As we all know, we started to cook during the pandemic. Well, and it was only recently in the past year or so that his famous cookware has hit the market successfully. What makes Jeff unique is that he started his business bootstrapping it all himself. Yes, there may have been a few dollars from family and friends, but essentially he put his money where his mouth is. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jeff today to Straight Talk for Business. And just as a little side comment, we have just learned in the last couple of weeks that Straight Talk for Business is one of the top podcasts in Canada. And we're very thankful to FeedSpot for hosting our podcast, along with several others platforms that we use. So here we are today. Jeff, welcome to Straight Talk.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We had a conversation a little while ago where I got to know a lot more about your business. And so that I'm not the one talking about your business, why don't you, in your own words, tell us a little bit about what got you started down this entrepreneurship path? Why, when, and what was the push?
Yeah, it's really one of those things that you fall into. So first off, I moved to the States about in 97, so a little bit more than 15 years ago. I started the company 15 years ago. I had been so I grew up in Montreal, and I helped expand the Future Shop into Quebec territory, and that was my first foray into consumer products. About a year later, I got promoted and moved to Vancouver, where I was a buyer at the corporate office, and that really, again, elevated my exposure and interest and understanding of the consumer products space. It was on a business trip down to Los Angeles when I saw the palm trees and this beautiful girl named Mia, who's now my wife and mother of my children, that really convinced me to throw caution to the wind and prove concept of my risk taking, I guess, early on. I went to work, quit. I found a way to get a visa, loaded everything up in a U-Haul and drove down to LA. a few years later, married Mia, and then it's been an incredible journey. From there, shortly after we got married, I moved to Dallas, where I was back at a retailer. I was working for CompUSA in the late '90s
Mm.
when they were the 800-pound gorilla. So really establishing myself in the American market and building up my network. And then we had kids, and my wife wanted to return home. So went to work one day, and just like I had done years earlier, told my boss, "Hey, I'm quitting." And I went home, grabbed my golf clubs, went to work, went to play a round of golf, and then came home from that and started figuring out, okay, what's next? How do we get back to California to be near her family? So I moved to California, and I started with a startup. It was a supply chain company, and helped to grow that business. And when that business got acquired and then got acquired again, I found myself after two earnouts and really kind of being unemployed. And so I had to figure out what's next. My personality, I've always kind of risen to be the leader in terms of, in a room, someone has to make decisions and I enjoy making them. And so one day, it's a pretty long story, and I won't tell that whole story here, maybe another time. But I just grabbed a friend of mine who also needed a change. The two of us jumped on a plane. We went to China with the idea that we were going to start a company. We didn't know what it was going to be, but by the time we came back, we would, and we did. And a short while after that, we launched our first product, which was the Rocksteady XS, a small Bluetooth speaker, very early in the Bluetooth speaker space. So really, I kind of, it wasn't strategic, it wasn't planned, there was never a roadmap. It just sort of one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, there you are.
But no doubt, there you were in China, not knowing what you were going to do. You had to make a decision. Nobody else was going to make it for you. That moment, describe that moment when you were literally jumping in at the deep end. You had to make a decision. You made it. And then a day or two later, what happened?
Well, every decision early on never felt real or impactful. It was always a case of, okay, yeah, we'll just do this next. We didn't really know where things were going, and it wasn't a full commitment. It wasn't until my partner was no longer with the company, but it wasn't until he needed, he felt he needed an office. So instead of an office, we started getting an office on a warehouse. And then once we had the office in the warehouse, it just made sense to fill it. And so we started to expand, and that's when it became real. Signing the first lease for my first warehouse, that was when it became real. Then I knew that, okay, I've got 3 years of lease payments. I have to figure this out. And that was a very sobering. I would say in the ownership or as a business owner, that was the first big time was like, okay, and you'll hear this theme throughout it is okay, I guess we're doing this. And a lot of projects kind of start off small and you take little steps, and then you get to this point where again, and I've said it in these exact words so many times, where either to myself or other people, I guess we're doing this, and then you have to. You have to move forward.
So, what is it about those moments? Yeah, we're doing this. Is there clarity? Is there just brute force and we're gonna go forward? What is it that causes you to do that instead of hesitating, freezing?
A lot of people are so much luckier than I am. They will take a gamble and have huge success right away, or they'll get, you hear the story of Microsoft, where they get handed an opportunity to become the operating system for IBM totally by winging it. In my case, I would say apologetically, largely ego early on. Yeah, we can do this. I can do this. I can take this on. Um, you know, in the moment to try to explain to an outsider why I would have been bullish or why I had the confidence to do that, they would have thought I was nuts. In fact, I probably was. Um, but it was really just a belief that in yourself that you can figure it out and that other people are figuring it out. So why can't you? And then I've always had the ambition of seeing myself not as just a local businessman, but of being a national or global. And so when you look at opportunity and you see opportunities everywhere, then it's just about being able to pivot quickly, to seize opportunities, and to stay aggressive.
What was there ever a time, whether it was with Rocksteady or when you did with the Piggy, and even with the cookware now, was there a time where you made a decision or stepped or took your next step way too early, and there was all these gaps? Was there, and as you look back over the last 15 years or so, were there any red flags that you see now when you think, "Oh, what was I thinking?" Any red flags that you see now that you didn't see then?
Large companies have the benefit of having teams that they can talk things through, or maybe capital to do focus groups. And as an entrepreneur, it's very lonely. You're making these decisions, you overthink these decisions, and you talk yourself into something. You build your own blind spots. But I guess there's three stories that um, tell the same story, but in different ways and different results. So early on with Piggy, the Piggy phone stand, um, we had we had gotten a decent size order from a large retailer, Five Below. But our goal was really Walmart, and getting into Walmart, they say it can make you or break you, and boy, it made me, and then it broke me. So it couldn't have been more of a true analogy. But Walmart, we had a meeting with Walmart. It went very well. The buyer said he wanted to add it, and um, he wanted to bring it in, and he was giving us a spot in his planogram. We didn't know how many pieces he was going to order. We were getting a forecast from our sales rep, but nothing validated by the buyer. We were waiting for the PO, but it got to the point that if we didn't start production now and with lead times as was, um, when that PO would finally come, we would have been late. So I was tossing and turning every day. Biggest opportunity in my life was ahead of me, and we had no PO, and I was about to let it fall through the cracks. And we're talking 2 million pieces of something, and it's just an incredibly scary thing to do. And I couldn't sleep, and I'm tossing and turning, and my wife is fed up with me already, and turns to me and says, "Just do it. Enough already. Just do it." So then that morning or a few hours later, I did. I placed a 2 million piece order with the factory, and sure enough, about 2 weeks later, the PO finally came, and we were the hero. And we were able to fill it. So that was a tough decision that worked out well. A few months later, Kroger, a national retailer here in the States, grocery store chain, that was supposedly a lot easier. They saw what was going on with Piggy, and they gave us a 1 million piece order. And they wanted to rush it in. Can we get it there by holiday? And we absolutely could. We had the capacity, and everything would have lined up. And so we went to work, built another 1 million pieces for Kroger. And then it got loaded onto the container, and the container arrived at the port of Long Beach, and it got flagged for customs. Customs inspection took a week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks. And just about 2 days before it got cleared from customs, Kroger called up and canceled the order. They said, we're going to miss holiday. And now my warehouse was too small to hold that. And we had no customer for it. And that was, that was an adventure. Certainly, we had to rework that inventory. Eventually got that sold. But as you kind of revealed earlier, 20 million units later, we did get that sold and many more. But the time was pretty devastating. But none of these gambles compares to what we did post-pandemic. I'll talk a little bit more as we go into things. The trade war of 2017, and then the pandemic that arrived just after that was devastating. It's kind of like being in an elevator and going up to like the 21st floor, and about halfway up, the floor opens up and you just start falling. There's nothing to hold on to. You don't know where the bottom is or if there is a bottom. And it really was the biggest test in my life. It really was horrible. And I lived it for 6 years. but it forced me to rebuild and a rebirth. And so post-pandemic, or really during the pandemic, we saw the opportunity with Hell's Kitchen. A friend of mine was selling that brand in the promotional space, and I felt that there was a strong consumer side to that business and retail. So without a contract or even a license, I booked a booth at the largest trade show in the world for housewares, cookware, and developed the product line. I put it at a booth, and feedback was very good. It was very strong, and that gave me the confidence to proceed. We invested at least another $1 million before we finally had the verbal approval from the brand to launch. And we're still negotiating contracts, but we're just now at the point where we've got enough wind in our back that we know the inevitable is coming. But it's incredible risks that we take. But this is the one that really defined me, I think, and really where I've learned the most and has tested my resolve.
And getting into cookware, something that's close and dear to my heart because I live in the kitchen. I love to cook, and cookware is something I can honestly say I invest a lot in. I don't just go and buy a pot. But you're now you're up against some really big brands here. There's famous cookware and there's some cheap cookware out there, of course. And cookware is everywhere, from Walmart to Bloomingdale's to Home Sense and Marshalls, and all these, every price point that you can imagine on a spectrum for cookware is out there. And you took a really bold move, not only with name recognition, but as you said, you went to a trade show, you took the name with you, and the amount of downside risk that itself carried. You must have had a strategy behind why you did that. You were faced with, well, if this doesn't work, then what am I going to do? So potentially another pivot or another change in your life. Talk about that. You must have seen an upside that was far, far greater than any downside. And how did you rationalize that in your head?
Sure. There were a few things that kind of buoyed my excitement and enthusiasm. So first of all, I'm always looking for gaps in the market. I'm not by nature comfortable living in a commodity space. So the first opportunity was, I looked at this, I went to this trade show. It was a massive show in Chicago, hundreds and hundreds of booths, vendors that were hundreds of years old, or large vendors like Frigidaire and Viking and just all of these massive brands. But from a true brand recognition, I felt that Hell's Kitchen was probably the most well-known brand in the room. Everybody knows Hell's Kitchen, the TV show. Everybody knows the restaurants. That really excited me. So connecting that to food and connecting that to the customer felt intuitively easy. But we really got, we took a huge gamble and then we got lucky. The first gamble was that we saw that hybrid cookware was an expanding growth sector within cookware. And this kind of goes in technical side of, I love manufacturing. I've loved going to factories. I love learning how products are made. And the more you can understand how a product is made, the more you understand the nuance and intricacies of options and how to develop and design products. And so hybrid cookware really was a category where it says, look, our frying pan isn't just a frying pan with a brand label on it. It has some unique features. And so we started off by developing a really, really good set of cookware, something that performs exceptionally well in a smaller subcategory of the space. And then where we got lucky is just as we were launching, there was a lot of legislation around forever chemicals or PFAS chemicals that was coming out, and there was really becoming a move away from these PFAS chemicals that everybody grew up with. People are familiar with Teflon and these other coatings. And some of these coatings, while arguably they're safe, there's certainly some aspects to it that concern people, and legislation was coming out. So it allowed us to launch and immediately jump into that space, being the first PFAS-free cookware in the hybrid cookware space. So we were able to differentiate ourselves very quickly from the market leader, and then we went all in on that brand strategy. And then now that we've established ourselves, now we can be somewhat a little bit more commoditized. We've got a really exciting set of kitchen knives coming out later this month. We've got about 8 or 9 different products that are going to expand on that. Everything from the barbecue to the cooktop and everything in between, including storage and prep and you name it. And as someone like you who enjoys being in the kitchen and cooking, to me, it's been the product development for that category has been the most fun thing ever. I'm able to design the products that I wish I could buy. Even something as simple as a cutting board or chopping blocks. It's so exciting to go to a factory that just makes that and to develop and design something that's exactly the way I would like it. And fortunately, with my experience at Best Buy, at Future Shop, which later became Best Buy, and then CompUSA, you start to understand what customers like. You understand the model. You understand the numbers behind a product. So what does your cost need to be? What does the supply chain look like? What does the wholesales need to be? And what does the marketing look to be? So you can quickly create these mini P&Ls for each product line. And so product development has been the most exciting part of the job. And then you have to fund it, right? So that's the second half to that. So,
but when you design a cutting board that doesn't dull a knife, please make sure you call me, because I go through cutting boards like nobody's business, and I find that they dull my knives. I mean, maybe they're designed to do that. I don't know. But, it sounds like no matter what you've given a try, whether it was the audio system, the Piggy phone stand, the cookware, your gambles have paid off. Have you not had a failure? I mean, if you did, we haven't mentioned it, but if you've had a failure, how did you autopsy that failure? What did you learn from it? What did you do differently because of that learning?
So we've had a lot of failures. Some of the failures have been me. Sometimes I can be my own worst enemy. I'm very impatient. I'm driven, and I think my brain's wired a little differently. So people who I work with or people who work for me have to understand that I'm part of the package. I'm a problem solver, and I think I got it from I had a boss named Gary years ago, and he was like that. Every nicest guy in the world until he got interested in the details, and then he started kind of grind into it, pulling out information out of you, and it's a painful process. And I've been at the other end of that now. As making these decisions, I have to have the comfort that I understand it my way. But I'd say Rocksteady Stadium has been both the biggest success and biggest failure for me. We, work. I created I had a vision that in the future we would connect wireless speakers together and create these expansive and immersive sound systems. And I had that vision back in 2015, and it was not a technology that existed or was possible. And so I knew that the technology would come. It was a matter of innovation, and I knew that there were other factors at play. You had the Bluetooth board, and you had certain chip makers that were trying to solve similar problems. So I got in early. I built the product with that feature set in mind, not knowing how it would work. After 3 years of development, we had failed. I had one more prototype. I remember as clear as day, sitting in a park in mainland China I had just flown in, and this was the final prototype before I was going to kill the project, and it was a fail. It died. It didn't work, and we couldn't get the connectivity to be consistent and reliable. And I left the park. I went back to Hong Kong. I remember the feeling of depression. I didn't leave my hotel room for 2 days. Then I got to the airport, flew home, and it was dead. And 2 weeks later, the factory says, "Hey, we think we made a breakthrough," and I said, "Okay, let's see." And then it was back alive. But that wasn't the failure. The failure was still to come. We launched 1.0 in a world that was changing. I was a brick and mortar guy. I had grown up in the Future Shop stores and then the buying offices, and online and e-commerce was something that was foreign to me. And the idea of marketing, direct to consumer marketing and brand building was still something I resented. I wouldn't say, I would say resented was the right word. I didn't want to do it. Anything, how can I throw money at this? How can I not be involved in that process was really my mindset. So um, we we launched Rocksteady 1.0. I had no money. I had even added a Kickstarter to help get it to market for our subwoofer, the world's first and only wireless subwoofer. We have the industry's best connectivity and range in our system, and we have but the system was great. 1.0 of Rocksteady Stadium was an incredible product, a really beautiful sound. But there were some issues. We were built on an architecture that wasn't strategically, it was kind of built backwards. We started with the last decision that we should have started with the first decision. So in 2024, just last year, we saw our rate of sales, we were growing, but our rate of sales was kind of a little too flat. And I didn't see the light at the end of that rainbow. And so I had to make a very tough decision. We rebuilt the product from the ground up, completely changed the architecture, walked away from hundreds of reviews on Amazon. And despite that the business was good and that we had good KPIs, they weren't great, which is what we wanted. Q4 last year, relaunched the product as Rocksteady Stadium 2.0, and it was an immediate failure. No reviews, no validation, very slow sales. And then we had we had some sales bumps, and then all of a sudden, because we didn't have a solid forecast, we ran out of inventory right in the holiday. And so by January, it looked like we had failed, and I was getting ready to think about an exit strategy for that. But we again retooled our marketing, did new photo shoots, built new assets, really pushed ourselves to come up with the energy, I would say, to get back out there and fight. And now Rocksteady Stadium 2.0 is on the right path. We're profitable. It's growing quickly. I see a path forward. I see the salvation or the light at the end of that rainbow and how that business is going to succeed. And so these failures has taught me, and I see that all around us, is that endurance often is the enemy of failure, right? If you can outlast your mistakes, if you can outlast the challenges, you often can survive. If you can survive those early ones, then there's a good chance you're gonna find a footing. That doesn't mean giving up isn't the right thing to do. In fact, as I studied economics in school, and I love economics, and there's many economists that believe that quitting early is the best advice you can give people. Pivot early, quit often. I haven't taken that advice often. I've preached it, but it's kind of where I am now, and I'm finally in a point where I believe in the different verticals we've got now are all on the right path.
Yeah. It reminds me of an old saying. I work quite a bit with mining companies as well. And as you might well know, mining is full of risk, full of entrepreneurs, full of vision. But there's an old saying is you never know when you're 3 feet from the gold, right? And the quit early, quit while you're ahead. I don't take up that mantle at all. But there's an element you've had throughout your entrepreneurial life. You've had so many decision points, as every entrepreneur has. How would you say you split the way that you make your decisions between what's hard data and what's gut feeling? Because there's sometimes you have to either follow your heart or follow your head. The two don't very often say the same thing. What about you? How do you rely on one versus the other?
Yeah, the word gut is so funny because when you're making a big decision, you literally feel nauseous in your stomach. You, especially if you're not certain of it. And so trusting your gut, it's almost like touching an oven, a stovetop, and it's hot, right? If your stomach is telling you this is wrong, then your gut is telling you something, and then your mind tries to outthink it, and then it's just tug of war. So it forces you to go and validate, keep on validating, keep on getting reinforcements to your beliefs. But ultimately, though, you're always taking that risk. You're placing, you've got to um, you've got to overcome that, and it just takes some intestinal fortitude, which another talk about the gut. Um, Small companies can move quickly and bigger companies move slowly and they've got huge overhead. So you do take solace in knowing that you can pivot very quickly, you can change paths very quickly. So sometimes you can rationalize a decision to say, okay, what are my outs? Or what's the milestone? And that's another thing. We're talking about my wife. I say, okay, if we, how many times was I going to quit? And says, okay, honey, um, by this date, we'll know. But that's never the case because on that date, now it's, oh, but now by this date we'll know. And then by this date we'll know. But really, I guess it really comes down to it really in a business, I guess it comes down to the basics is money, right? Is if money's coming in faster than it's going out, then I guess it's working. And you have to have a good, build some good, strong KPIs, close your months, close your weeks, close your days, know your business, know your numbers, know if you're heading the right direction, get ahead of issues because everything may look good from the outside, but inside your gut, your stomach's telling you, oh, I'm headed for a cliff here. I have to make a change. And then you have to have the energy to wake up, to jump out of bed, bring that energy, to motivate your teams to drive that new direction, to avoid that hurdle or roadmap or cliff. Um, it's so funny. You had talked about 3 feet away from striking this gold or whatever it is you're digging for. Uh, when uh, when I was at my lowest, I always felt that I was more like that guy crawling through the desert over one dune, back down, and as you get to the top of the dune, you look and see you hope you see the road or the city, and you never know. I just never want to be the guy that kind of just stops and then the camera pans out and it was that last dune was the one where there's salvation. So you really have to never give up. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have a drive and keep pushing, and you have to do the impossible. You just have to keep going.
And it sounds like you've had the Piggy, you've got the Rocksteady. So the Piggy has been retired, yes?
We moved it online. We could relaunch that, but it's more of a just it's more or less retired.
Retired. Okay. So you've got your audio equipment, that's still there. You've got the cookware, and now you've got more products coming out. So more ideas. And so you've got momentum now. You're building momentum. And as we know, for many people, momentum can really lead them down a path of burnout from time to time. So, what do you have in place? You must have a team by now. What have you got in place? What are your kind of practices, if you will, that's from keeping you from, frying yourself in a proverbial, frying pan, keeping that engine going? What are you doing?
Sure. So yeah, we have a team. The less I speak to them, the more I know that my plan is working. When I see productivity occur and results happen, that I'm not the one that either pushed the boulder or dragged it over the last yard into the end zone. I guess sports and whatever. Um, that's exciting. Most exciting thing for me has always been when I see productivity from employees that have bring initiative and who are able to carry the mantle. But in an e-commerce world where I am now, the closer you are to the customer, the more power you have. And for the first time, I'm really we're arm's length from the customer. We're right there, and that gives us the confidence or the power in negotiating with partners. So right now we're in the process of finalizing an international deal. We've got Asia and Europe about to come online. We're doing that through partnerships where we can now expand through their capital using their infrastructure. And once those partnerships are in place where we've got this global footprint for distribution and supply chain, now we can really leverage it. So I'm so excited about what 2026 brings, because not only are we expanding Hell's Kitchen with 6 or 7 more product lines within Hell's Kitchen, but we're expanding Rocksteady, and then we've got 2 more brands that we look to take on in 2026. And as we can use these partnerships and those supply chains and those relationships to our benefit, it allows us to make money off of existing investments, so that we don't have to establish creating additional investments, creating additional return on initial investments, and making that extend long term is really the secret to profitability. And so that's really what we're the new focus now.
Yeah. So as you've been talking, you mentioned KPIs several times, and KPIs for me really translates into generating the outcomes you really want, right? And so tell me a little bit more about it's a measure, right? It's a metric that you have. So tell me a little bit more about how you use those KPIs. How does it affect your business decisions? How does it improve what you do for your business? And how important are they to your business in terms of how often do you really look at your KPIs? Is it a daily, weekly, monthly, quarter? How do you use them?
Sure. So KPIs, or for your listeners, key performance indicators, it's personal to every company. Every company's got to create their own. There are some that spread across every company. Financial reports, for example, when we close our months, we have a P&L or an income statement, and that tells us, hey, did we make money this month, right? And or do we have this expense going up or this going down? So we not only track everything on the income statement by month at the bottom line, we also look at, okay, what's our expenses, or what's this number as a relationship to that number? So creating percentages or ratios of different things allows you to track different things in different ways. Once you get into digital marketing, the key KPIs are terms, again, the world's full of acronyms. You have ROAS and TACOS. So our ROAS is ROAS, or return on ad spend. So it tells us every dollar we spend on advertising will generate how much in sales. And it's incredible how reliable these numbers are. In other words, if we have a campaign that gives us a 5x ROAS, which means that for every dollar I spend on advertising, I can have $5 of sales, then intuitively that says I should spend $10 so I can get 50, or I can spend $1 million and get 5 million. There is the law of diminishing returns. So the market's only so big, or there is elasticity. But I look more at tacos, which is an extension of that, because we have a lot of organic demand. And we look at organic demand, it means sales that weren't generated by ads, or sales that weren't maybe directly linked to an ad. So if we spend $1, can we get $10 of sales? Can we get $8 of sales? Can we get $15 of sales? So that's something we look at on a weekly basis. A more granular version in e-commerce world is that every day you wake up and your business is at 0. And every night you go to sleep and you had a day. So that's kind of scary, And so how was today versus yesterday? How was today versus how is this month versus last month? And how is today versus the same day a year ago? And so these year over year or period over period helps to give you some ideas about trends and whether you're performing. But you can break KPIs into so many different ways. If you run in a warehouse, you have that one, hey, nobody got hurt in 5 weeks, no injuries. Every KPI is really designed to address those pain points. And if you're measuring something, then you know how you're doing. you can't leave that to chance. You can't just say, oh, look what happened. Hey, we made money this year. Or hey, look what happened. We have a trend, but we didn't see it. So if you're not involved in your business, if you're not really focused on those details, then you don't really have a grasp of where the opportunities are and where the threats are.
It's interesting that you are what I would say pretty astute when it comes to working on your business. One of the comments that I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs is, especially when it's generational business, second, third generation, and so on. They talk about my father, my uncle, whoever it is they're taking the business over from, is they taught me to work in the business. They never taught me to work on the business. So would you say, in your case specifically, that you got that awareness of how to work on your business because you came from a corporate environment? Do you think that had a lot to do with it? Whereas some entrepreneurs, like I said, if it's generational transfer of business and so on, maybe they never worked anywhere else. They worked in the business right from the get-go. Maybe went to college, went to university, but that's academic versus business practical. Can you comment on that?
Sure. I think part of that is how I got here in terms of my personality. I've always wanted to work on the business, never in the business. That's been my dream. People who know me for a long time know, like 15 years ago when I started this company, my dream was to have 1,000 employees, not because I wanted 1,000 employees, but because I wanted to get out of the weeds. I wanted I wanted to be making decisions that I would see on TV and in movies, be in that boardroom, be at the front of the boardroom and doing, that's what really excited me. And so when the business started to falter, it reminded me that, hey, if I'm not working in the business, then I can't work on the business because there's no business. So I had to tear myself down a little bit. I had to get back down to picking orders and getting in front of customers and writing copy and doing the things that I thought I hated. And until I learned to enjoy doing those things, or until I learned to enjoy doing those things, I couldn't do them well. And so working in the business and on the business, there has to be a balance. I'm running as far as I can towards working on the business as a full-time job. That won't really come until I have a full and complete A team, group of people that I work for me that can then, senior executive, senior management. And that was my dream, when we talk about 1,000 employees. And I am getting closer to that, except I'm doing it in a different way. The pandemic humbled me and really changed my viewpoint in terms of being flexible and being able to scale up and down. I've had to rescale the company to meet revenues too many times to make long-term decisions easily. So hiring people, while I love hiring people, because that means that we're growing and that means that there's more that we can do, I'm more scared of it than I ever have been, because I've had to lay people off so many times, and laying people off is difficult and can be very, and when we're downsizing, if you wait too long, which I did during the pandemic, it can nearly bankrupt you, which nearly did for me. So my new approach is almost to franchise myself. And that's when I talked about my international plans of expansion, and my lateral plans is to build partnerships where I have other companies who are able to take what I've built and then capitalize them within their markets or their segments. And they're able to grow with their capital and their resources, but ultimately they are reporting to me. So I view myself more as a franchise owner of my ideas. And then a lot of it we monetize internally, but where we can do it externally through partnerships, that allows me to get closer to my dream. And when they're all productive, then there's days where I can go on vacation for 2 weeks and I know that, hey, the European partners are making me money today. And then, these other partners are making money in this segment. And when I say making me money, I'm really talking about step one is bringing it into the company so I can pay my employees more so we can grow, we can have a longer future, and then also to pay down debt that I've taken on through the pandemic. That was a tough one.
So you've got a strategy here that's not really top of mind for a lot of entrepreneurs, and that is to have strategic partners and trusting that someone's going to honor the work that you've brought to the table. And that must have been a scary step because I can tell you there are many entrepreneurs that are not able to take that step. So, what was it about your business, the confidence in your business, the partners that you sought out? How did you approach that? What was your motivation behind doing that? Because that is so important if you're going to grow internationally as opposed to, locally or domestically in the country.
Sure. So first of all, when I was at my lowest, I look around, I saw people who were succeeding, people who I felt weren't working as hard as me, weren't maybe as smart as I was, or whatever. And I realized it's all about your network. If you're not building your network and your friendships and building strong connections with people, you're leaving opportunity and money on the table. I have so many regrets as I look back to opportunities. I've done it the hard way by not nurturing all those relationships the right way and not investing in making those relationships long term. I've changed. My viewpoint now is that the people I know, the friendships I've got, and the friendships I'm going to make, those are critical. So, but still, why do these people want to help you? Why do they want to do that? Well, you have to have leverage. You have to have power. So finding success with Rocksteady and finding success with Hell's Kitchen, sharing that opportunity with others is the kind of the carrot on the stick, and so you got to put it out there in front of them. I've learned how to be, in my mind, I'm always looking 20, 30 steps down the board. If you look at a chess game, I've got the plan. I've already got it figured out. But when I go talk to people with my plan and I share with them the end result, they get overwhelmed. They don't see it. They don't know how to connect A to Z.
Oh,
But in my
I can
mind,
relate
it's
to
so
that.
easy. So I've had to learn how to be patient. When I know that Z is coming, I have to only talk about B because we're only on step A.
Yeah.
And then once we get to B, then I could say, oh, here's C, here's D. And you know what? By doing that, A, it doesn't overwhelm people. B, it allows you to change your plan midstream. So now the letter E might be a different E than it would have been originally. And it's just a lot more manageable. How do you, there's so many analogies for that, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Or how do you get to the moon? You can't look at that project in its entirety. You got to break it down to tiny, tiny bite-sized pieces. So solving the biggest problems in the world or reaping the biggest opportunities in the world starts by taking very small steps. And small step after small step after small step, you've reached the summit. And when you reach the summit, you see all those steps, but you knew it was there, you knew you can get there, but you had to be patient and strategic.
This reminds me years ago, one of the things I learned is that complexity isn't really that, it's just poor design. And it strikes me, as we've been talking, that you've thought through your business design step by step by step. And so you've built a big business, but not a complex one because you've designed it so. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's not complex to me. I know where everything is. I think
Mhm.
if tomorrow I walked away from the business and handed the keys to my wife, it would be like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we get inventory into this location? We've got warehouses in Canada. We got warehouses on the East Coast, warehouses here. We've got these partners and these partners. We've got POs and productions and bank loans and just so many moving pieces. But it's amazing what you can take on. You just have to understand your business. You have to understand what's going on. And then as soon as you're there, it's like that famous line, thank you, may I have another. And so just keep on taking more, believe in yourself. and keep taking steps forward, and you'll reach that summit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jeff, is there anything that you want to add that I haven't asked you about? I feel like I've been drilling you for the almost an hour now, but is there anything that you think you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, I guess family, that when that elevator floor opened and my whole life was crashing, all my dreams were crashing with it. I knew what I wanted to be when I was 60, when I'm 70, when I'm 80. I knew where I was trying to build my life towards. And in that elevator moment, everything was disappearing. I was losing my dreams. It was okay, now maybe my future is to be a security guard or a janitor. There was no, you're laughing. The low is so low where you just, you know, there's no paycheck, right? Unless you make it. And the pandemic came, it killed me, but it also brought my family home. My kids were at college. They came home when the schools closed.
The tough days, the tough days. Yeah. And the entrepreneurs that have a family intact are the ones that did it right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Jeff, how can people get a hold of you?
I love hearing from people. Email is my favorite way of getting connected, so I'm happy to provide it here. It's JLEITMAN at KILLERC.com. I do have 10 email addresses for each of my businesses, but that's my primary one. I love hearing from people. I love hearing from customers. I'm always open for opportunities. No one gets more excited about an opportunity than me. You put something, if I see an opportunity, my eyes light up. I can see it right away. I was out with a friend just 2 days, or I met somebody 2 days ago. We were on a little boat trip out to Catalina here with some friends, and he was talking about his new venture, and I got so excited for him. And even if I just wanted to help him, I see the opportunities and things, and it drives this. It's like putting a spark in me. And I say, oh, I can connect A to Z. I see the path. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Let's move quickly. And so um, I'm also really good at squashing ideas. I used to be part of a CEO group, and what's great about CEO groups is that you actually have more in common with other CEOs than you think, and they're facing a lot of the same issues you are, and so they may have a problem that you've already faced, or you may have a problem that they've already faced, and so being able to share and have a connection with people who can give you good advice. That's critical. If I have an idea and I go to friends who aren't business owners, they're always going to want to be supportive. They're going to lie to you. They're just going to tell you what they need to tell you because they don't want to be the one that squashes your dream. They don't want to say, no, don't do it. Because who knows, maybe you would have been the next Uber. So, really to expand your network, strengthen your network, talk to people, be open. As you can see, I'm a very, uh, uh, and I'm an emotional leader. I'm transparent and I'm vulnerable. I'm always um, easily to share my fears and the concerns I've got because I can't get good feedback unless I'm really an open book. And so, trust the people you trust, and grow your network, and really anything's possible.
Okay, so I am going to include your contact information in the information with the podcast, as well as on the video on YouTube. And all the best in growing your new product lines. And really, I hope they really, really take off for you. And I just love the Hell's Kitchen brand. I got to tell you, I just love that brand. And I want to thank you. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today and with our listeners. Again, you're being featured on one of the top podcasts in Canada. So thank you so much.
Well, let me just, we didn't touch on that enough. Hello, Canada. I love you. I miss you, especially in today's times where the US and Canadian relationships are stressed a little bit. I've been in America more than half my life now, but I left Canada when I was 25, and I'm now in my early 50s. It saddens me that we're going through this time, but I know that Canadians are strong, and that these type of change is always good in the end. When I've been in businesses or whatever, seize your opportunities, believe in yourself, and I look forward to being up there in Canada again and seeing you all. Thank you.
Okay.